Today is the feast that recalls the dedication of the Basilica of St. Mary Major in Rome. And basically there are four major basilicas. Basilica is just a word that refers to an important church that falls directly under the authority of the Holy Father. So there are four major basilicas. They tend to be places of devotion and pilgrimage. So they tend to have a great significance for the faithful. In Rome, they are the churches which house the tomb of St. Peter, St. Peter's at the Vatican, the church that houses the tomb of St. Paul, called St. Paul's outside the walls, the church which houses the first mensa or tabletop, altar top that St. Peter celebrated Mass on, and that's St. John at the Lateran Hill. That is what we call the Cathedral of Rome. And the fourth one is a church that has a remnant of the crib from Bethlehem, and that is the Church of St. Mary Major. These four major basilicas date all the way back to that period of the 4th and 5th centuries, when Constantine had converted kind of to Christianity. It all depends on who you talk to, but certainly his mother had converted with a great zeal, Saint Helena. And when Constantine issued what is referred to as the Edict of Milan, it allowed for religious freedom that previously hadn't existed. So up until this point, it was not free in the Roman Empire to exercise your religion, and it was typically considered to be a very negative thing if you were a Christian, and therefore you were sort of driven, as we say, underground, and sometimes quite literally into the catacombs to celebrate the sacraments, the Mass, the Most Holy Eucharist, for a period of hundreds of years, from the time of the death of St. Peter until the time of this Edict of Milan. The church in Rome had to live sort of underground. And then after this Edict of Milan, after this religious freedom now exists in the Roman Empire, then you see the Christians now come out and exercise the practice of their faith in these public buildings, which we called churches. And Constantine ordered the construction of four on the sites of the tomb of Peter, the site of the tomb of Paul, and on a certain site on the Lateran Hill, which was going to be the cathedral for that area, and then this fourth site. Tradition has it that it was being contemplated to put up a church in honor of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And where to put it was a bit of a question. And then sometime in August, there was this crazy freak snowfall. And it came down on this certain area, and it left something of a shape of a basilica. And that became the place or the location of St. Mary Major's basilica. So oftentimes St. Mary Major is associated with Our Lady of the Snows, because it was from the snowfall that they determined the location of this basilica. But what's also really important to note is that it was considered constitutive that a Christian would have a devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. That means it was inconceivable that a Christian would not have had a devotion to the Virgin Mary. It was part and parcel to the spiritual and faith life of the Christian. You would revere the tombs and the places of St. Peter and Paul, and of course a place for your own cathedral, but also a place in honor of the Virgin Mother. It was simply inconceivable that you could have Christianity apart from a devotion to the Virgin Mary. And so it's really an important aspect. It seems like a small and finer point, but it's hardly a small and finer point for we who live in the Bible Belt, where oftentimes we get questions about the Virgin Mary. Because for a lot of Christians out there today, the idea is that, this whole Virgin Mary thing is over the top. It's got its focus on the wrong person, and so on and so forth. But what we see when we celebrate something like this today is that it was simply assumed that a sound Christian faith had a certain reverence and respect for the singular role that the Virgin Mary played in the history of salvation. And so it's important for us to remind ourselves of that. And that for those people who find themselves struggling with understanding why anyone would call attention to the Virgin Mary, that they're kind of the ones who are out of step with 2,000 years of Christianity, not we. We're not the ones on the defense here. You've got to explain why you change things. We don't, in terms of, I know because oftentimes when we get in conversations with our neighbors and our friends, especially in the Bible Belt, about this topic, we're the ones who feel like we have to justify ourselves. But you got to kind of flip that around a little bit and say, look, we're in sync with 2,000 years. I can show you the major basilicas when they came out from the underground of Rome in the 4th and the 5th centuries, that they built tombs they built churches and basilicas on the sides of the tombs of Peter and Paul, and they dedicated one all to Mary. This was consistent with Christian faith. It was inconceivable not to have a devotion to the Virgin Mary. So then you have to kind of explain, why would you then lose that part of Christianity after 1,500 years? So just a little bit of apologetics, so you can defend your faith a little bit better in the context in which we live, but also feel very comfortable with the fact that here we are celebrating the dedication of a church that goes back over 1,500 years ago, one of the first major pilgrim sites for Christians in their area of Rome, in honor of the Blessed Virgin Mary, which houses a remnant of the crib from Bethlehem.